Happy Memorial Day to you. I'm Ari Melber. This is MS Now special coverage, continuing live on this sort of official long weekend start of the summer. And our top story this hour is the rift in the Republican Party over Trump's plot to take your taxpayer money, give it out to thugs and convicts. It's not going well. Acting Attorney General Blanche could not get Senate leaders on board with this going into the weekend. The idea that this would be just one more thing that would happen and people would make some noise, but Trump would get away with it, is evaporating and fading and turning into something that is stretching out into much more of a headache for Republicans. And it may ultimately fail. It might be stopped by Congress or the courts. Either way, it has been a drag on Trump as the summer begins. Blanche was trying to tamp down concerns, but even hardcore Trump loyalists, conservative Republicans, have been piping up. Apparently, while sometimes they gross in private, they give the blind quotes off the record or on background to reporters. We hear about all these anonymous Republican critics. This one is over the line for many. Here was Ted Cruz.
The Republican senators were pissed. People were, the entire meeting, they were screaming at the acting attorney general. And he was trying to lay out the legal basis. And there were multiple senators yelling at the attorney general saying, this feels like self-dealing. This feels like Trump cut a deal with himself.
That's Ted Cruz in the meeting, reporting from the meeting, which is pretty interesting. You might not always want Ted Cruz's podcast to be the first thing you listen to, right? Why he's spending time during his government salary making so much media is a separate question. But if he's telling the truth and not just sort of channeling it for any other political reasons, they're all politicians. But if he's telling the truth and we have other independent accounts of a similar nature, wow, pissed, yelling at the attorney general and saying the thing that Trump critics have been saying for over a decade now, that it's corruption, it's self-dealing, it's self-enrichment, it's an obsession with making money for himself, not public service. I told you there are other accounts that match Ted Cruz's podcast. The Times said it was a 2-hour blow-up with making money for himself, not public service. I told you there are other accounts that match Ted Cruz's podcast. The Times said it was a 2-hour blow-up where dozens, that would mean more than half the caucus, more than 20 Republican senators vented their anger and were so livid by the end that they just skipped any vote on the immigration bill that was part of Trump's agenda. House Republicans angry, so they have a rift too. And senators are concerned about who's going to get the money. Remember, even the senators and House members who have sometimes downplayed January 6th because that's Trump's demand, they also lived through it. And so giving out money to fund the people who were convicted by juries of their peers for trespassing and assaulting and going into the Congress, which is their place of work, you could see how, even if they are craven political sellouts, how they might think, I don't know that I want to give out money to the convicted criminals who came and had me running in my workplace and were threatening to hang people. I don't know if I like that idea. Now, I always keep it real with you when I report on things. This is a very likely corrupt, illegal deal, by which I mean it is not on the level, and it is likely, if it is tested in courts, to ultimately not be fully legal, to be trimmed or stopped. So that's the most important thing to keep in mind. It's not really about a lawsuit or the IRS or any of that stuff. Those are the cover stories, the lies. They also erected this commission to try to, in a classic sort of political way, get people talking about that it has 5 members, but they could be picked and fired by Trump, that there's no judicial review, yada, yada. But the commission is just one more Washington game. Everybody understands the idea is Trump taking over $1 billion from you, the taxpayer, to give to people that might help him with his next insurrection. It's an unprecedented use of public funds. It's not how the DOJ's judgment fund is supposed to work. That's been widely reported as an abuse of the judgment fund, and its operations could be curtailed. This can't become, for example, a, quote, piggy bank for any incumbent administration, currently Trump, to just finance their favorite causes. That is a sort of elaborate way of saying the obvious. This isn't his money. Congress didn't appropriate it. They are seizing it and testing whether they can get away with it. And everything else is just noise. IRS, settlement, commission. Sometimes there are details in a valid process where experts and lawyers focus on that intently because you say, well, here's the system and here's the standard for review. This isn't that. This is a corrupt seizing of your tax dollars to pay off convicted criminals, including some who were convicted of some of the worst crimes you can imagine: attacking police, trying to assassinate public officials, trying to overthrow our democracy, or if you want to be old school, as it's called in the federal code, sedition against the United States of America. And any other time, that's something that's punished and you go away to prison. In this Trumpian time, that's been rewarded, freed from prison, and now set up for payments that are extracted from you, the taxpayer, if they get away with it. As the old saying goes, Happy Memorial Day. I want to bring in Emily Bazelon from the New York Times and Ankush Kharduri, former federal prosecutor. Ankush, I tried to lay that out clearly. Your views?
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right when you say that, the litigation, the settlement, the commission, they're sort of red herrings. I've gotten a lot of questions about this. How could he settle it? Was the case meritorious? Does it make sense to set up this fund out of it? And it's like, no, actually, none of it made any sense. The transition from this case that never should have been brought by Trump to a sort of wholly unrelated conceptually notion of just giving $1.8 billion to these people, it doesn't make any legal or logical sense. As you say, it is just a giveaway. I would say, I'm more tentative about the prospects for the challenges in the courts, just because, this is so unusual and courts struggle with these things. And, I don't think there should be any uncertainty around this. I think Congress should shut it down as quickly as possible. There should be $0 in this fund. It is a really, really corrupt endeavor, and it is premised on a pack of lies about the 2020 election and the people who illegally tried to overturn that election from Trump, from his officials, all of whom deserve to be investigated and prosecuted. And yes, all the way down to the people who stormed the Capitol, including, yes, sympathetic people like maybe grandmothers who went and committed crimes. I'm sorry, that is how the criminal justice system works.
Right. And you've been a prosecutor, and so it really flies in the face of all of that. Emily, I want to play something here tonight, and it is Memorial Day, and you think about what these holidays mean and how we mark our evolution as a country. Sometimes we hear about 250 years or look back at what the originalist intent was. I want to just show tonight what Donald Trump claimed on January 7th, 21. You don't have to go that far back in the anniversary. He was then claiming that he was against the violence and that these people would pay to the fullest extent of the law. So I'm going to show some of the violence and what he said. Take a look.
Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay.
Something. Emily?
I think it's really important to remember that that was a collective shared moment of horror. There was very little ambiguity about it, very little dissent. You're absolutely right. I think what we've seen since then is how much Trump cares about rewriting this story, because it's become central to his idea about himself as president, that actually he did not try to overturn the election that day, that the people who were there, came in peace, listened to him, were doing something that was helpful to him even. That's really where he's moved. And he is willing to take big political hits to rewrite that history. In some ways, it seems like the most important thing to him, right? This fund is deeply unpopular. Yes, Congress could shut it down, has the leverage to do that. But he's going out on this limb because this idea, this revisionist history, that January 6th was not what you just showed on the screen, but was something entirely different, that's become his story, that he wants to rewrite the history books to show, and the fund is a crucial element of that to him.
Ankush?
Yeah, no, I think Emily's exactly right. I mean, it is something that he's clearly very, very intently focused on. It remains extremely unpopular. Let's make that clear. Trump's position on January 6th, or what he did surrounding January 6th and 2020 election has consistently polled very badly, including among independents. Of course, it cratered right after January 6th, but even through the Biden administration, among the investigations and cases that were polled and brought throughout that 4-year period, the January 6, 2020 election DOJ case consistently polled higher than the other cases because people were more interested and angry about that. I commissioned some of those polls when I was writing. And so, and Emily exactly right. Of course, it was day one when Trump issued his pardon of the January 6 defendants. That too was very, very unpopular. I think as it related to the defendants who were convicted of violent offenses, the polling showed that 3/4 of the country disapproved of those pardons. And yet he's he's still going, as Emily is saying. And I think that is the only explanation, that he views it as central to him. He's extremely unpopular right now. This notion, this proposal itself, very, very unpopular. He doesn't seem to care because his principal consideration seems to be providing him with some sense of vindication around the 2020 election. I don't know if he actually thinks he won or not at this point. I mean, it's been so long that he may actually be deluded about it, but it's very, very concerning that this is what takes up so much of his time and energy when the country has real problems. And when, he and his administration told us all last year that they had to slash through the federal government because we have a budget problem, which we really don't.
Right. And Emily, while there are ways that public opinion still matters because you can measure it affecting what Congress will do or let him get away with, what Wall Street and the Fed does, elections are not the only way public opinion matters. The big hole in the analysis here is that if he is successful at rebuilding an insurrection force and they lose in 28, and that could affect him because he'd be worried about legal exposure or indictments. He's the only president that's been indicted after leaving office. If he thinks that the plot will work this time and he can swing an election while he's leaving office in 28 back to a Republican, say a Vance or a Rubio, then you can see an anti-democratic logic in what he's doing. And that's what Jamie Raskin and other Democratic leaders think is going on, which is a kind of a dark way to analyze domestic politics. That's more typically how we would look at, oh, well, Putin doesn't care about this because he's not answerable to elections. Here was Raskin.
It's all about weaponizing the tax dollars of the American people to support Donald Trump's private militia. If these people had real viable causes of action against anybody, they would go to federal court. And the ones who have gone to federal court have lost their cases overwhelmingly.
How about that sort of depressing but different rationale for why he doesn't worry about popularity if this is his plan?
Yeah, I've been talking to some former January 6 prosecutors who tried these cases and know some of these defendants' actions really closely, and they have a similar concern about this, that this money would go to people who would then feel emboldened to threaten the fairness and integrity of the next election. And, you compare that with Todd Blanche's statement at the Conservative Political Action Conference a couple months ago, where he said, why would anyone object to the idea of ICE agents at the polls? Now, there are statutes that prevent that from happening, but if you have the acting attorney general casually making reference to this idea that you're going to have federal agents at the polls, Blanche was talking about it in terms of the idea of people who are undocumented voting illegally. But of course, agents at the polls could deter a lot of people from voting legally and cause other problems. That's why we have laws against it. This is the kind of scenario about 2026 or 2028 that I think legitimately keeps people up at night.
Yeah. Emily and Ankush, I thank you both, and happy holidays and time off, of course. I'll tell folks what's coming up. Mayor Mamdani, we will hear directly. Welcome back to our MS Now special coverage. It is Memorial Day. Government is closed. There tends to be a little less news coming out of Washington. I mean, we don't get congressional hearings or press conferences on a holiday. But there is some news coming out of Washington, and it's something Trump might prefer people miss as they're busy with the holiday. The Post reports that he's headed into a third visit to Walter Reed Hospital in just over a year. He has seen scrutiny as an image-conscious person of the photos of irregularities or apparent bruising on his hands. And he has, in his own public life, been unable to prevent moments where his eyes are closed while people are in the room, what appears to be a sleepy dawn moment, although eye of the beholder, whether that eye is open or closed, as to whether this was an official nap or something else. Then there are the late night rants. You could be the biggest Trump defender in the world, and you would at least privately say, hey, if I don't want him to look bad, let alone like he fits the caricature of an aging loony person, I would really prefer that he didn't post unhinged, untrue images, potential defamatory attacks, other things that involve racism that he sometimes deletes and sometimes doesn't. We're not going to show you the actual images, but we'll show you the headline about the criticism for it that you just saw up there, and the fact that these late night rants make him look odd, and that's putting it nicely. Even longtime supporters and former employees are concerned. A 3-time Trump voter even saying perhaps he must be removed for health reasons before it's too late. Or a very serious longtime conservative Republican who was providing legal counsel to Trump in the first-term White House, Ty Cobb, as well as a longtime Trump critic on the other side of the ledger, both Cobb and Carville weighing in.
You could just look at the guy as just an average person and say, this man is deteriorating at a really rapid rate.
The man is insane. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
You can watch him. You don't have to be a neurologist, a Dr. Jonathan Reiner or anything like that. We've all had experience with people aging.
This is somebody who just is lost, and he gets into these screeds at odd times. And one of the classic symptoms of Alzheimer's is the sleep-wake reversal.
Other people who I respect told me that they sense there's a real slippage, a real deterioration beyond just the normal craziness that he's engaged in.
So we see these screeds coming out at 4 a.m. and we see him falling asleep in cabinet meetings in the mornings and in the afternoon. That's a classic symptom of dementia.
I don't think his future is very bright, both politically or cognitively.
That's the view from two political elder statesmen in both parties. We're joined by Howard Dean, who's run for president, for Vermont governor, of course, DNC chair, and relevant to this discussion, he is a medical doctor. Governor, obviously, when you go into diagnosis, you have to have a doctor in the room with him. This administration has been challenged for transparency. There are experts quoted in the Washington Post who say they're not sharing a lot about these extra visits. Everyone, of course, wants him to get all the care he might need. And that's a bit of the medical piece. There's also just a governance piece. Lawmakers are concerned about this, particularly the late night rants and the things that he doesn't seem to be dialing back. Here's some of what we've heard from lawmakers, and we'll get your view on the other side.
We are seeing with him more and more has moments, which are getting much longer, of just complete mental unawareness and mental instability.
I don't know how anyone can see what he posts or watch him in any meeting and think that he's fit for office.
I think he's seriously ill. I think Trump needs medical attention, and there needs to be an intervention.
Governor Dean?
Well, first of all, one shouldn't, in the medical profession, make diagnoses from abroad without having examined the patient, and I certainly have never examined him. What I would say is this. Trump has always been odd. And he has a long history in his business dealings of saying one thing and doing something else and not telling the truth and deceiving people. And that's part of who Donald Trump is, for better or for worse. Are there some signs that he's getting old? Yeah. And he's the stuff that's, what the heck is this guy doing, posting stuff in the middle of the night, which is bizarre. So there's something going on. The bruised hands, I do not think, are insignificant. I think he's probably getting infusions of some sort on a regular basis. But, you really have to have a doctor decide what's the matter with him. And the doctor ethically should be somebody who examines Donald Trump, and that's not me.
Yeah. How then do we deal with a situation like this? We just went through it with the past president, who happened to be in a different party. We saw, again, on the Democratic side, Senator Dianne Feinstein in an important position, not a unitary position like the president, but she declined in office in a way that was difficult for family and friends to see sort of her working in a way where in a normal job,
Right.
you wouldn't continue to work that way because it wouldn't just be up to you. And many people's hearts go out to Senator McConnell, who I'm not equating where he's at today to Donald Trump. But there's videos we wouldn't even show from a standards perspective because they're more humiliating than enlightening. But you say, well, in a normal job, you wouldn't be on the job. Your thoughts about the structural oversight question?
Well, we clearly, our Constitution did not envision this. We clearly need some reforms. One, and this is already true of the presidency, so it wouldn't help in this situation. We need term limits. We have term limits for the presidency. We need term limits for the Supreme Court. Clearly, that is a major problem. We need term limits for the House and term limits for the Senate, not just because of the whatever mental problem Trump has or older people, so the kind of people you've talked about, but because when they've been there for too long, the whole country is absorbed by seeing if they can get their spot back instead of actually doing something for the American people. I think we'd get a much better Congress if they were term limited and they could act on behalf of the people who sent them there rather than their own behalf, which unfortunately is something that happens. Second of all, unfortunately, the Republican Party has degenerated into a group of fearful people who are afraid of Donald Trump, who's clearly not entirely there. And they don't have the courage or the backbone to stand up for their country. They care about their career. And the interesting thing is when you see the people that have lost primaries, like Massey and like Tillis, who decided not to run again, they're free agents. And then they start standing up for things that are the right thing to do as they see it. So we're in big trouble. We need major constitutional changes, irrespective of what Trump's personality disorders, which he's always had, and whatever illness he may have.
Yeah. And final question to you, having been around politics, we're going into a summer where if the midterms were held today, a lot of folks think Democrats would win. Republican senators have said as much. But there's still a long way out. What do you think the Democratic Party should do during this energy and affordability crisis, open-ended war, a lot of headwinds? What should they do?
I think the Democrats are slowly, much too slowly for my taste, learning the lesson that this is not about inside the Beltway crap. This is this reaction to the so-called report that the DNC had, and then Ken didn't want to put it out. Then he put it out. This is ridiculous nonsense. This is not important. What's important is how does the Democratic recover the confidence for working people in this country? This is where Bernie Sanders is exactly right. The average person didn't want to vote for Donald Trump. People are not stupid. They know what Donald Trump is, but they didn't see the Democrats doing anything for them. And so the Democrats have got us talk about health care issues, which the Republicans are terrible on, public schools. I happen to be very interested in Andy Beshear's candidacy because he's talking about public schools and jobs. And that is what's going to get us elected. And that's what's going to sweep out the Republicans who have sort of all retired themselves to a nursing home, protecting their own turf.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned him. You come from a somewhat untraditional state in terms of populist rural issues to some degree, but he's one of the more popular Democratic governors. I told viewers, I actually sat down with him about a week ago in New York, coming out of a red state, and that's a whole different model. So very interesting. Governor Dean, I wish you a very happy holiday and the start of summer.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
शाही लिखावट के हर बनने में तकदीर है सहमासा हूँ तुझमें मानो तू ही मेरी तकदीर है क्या पुकार मेरी सामने तू वैसे की रही है तेरी यादों के सफर में कोई गुस्सा नहीं हो दूरी तुझसे कितनी तेरी तारीफों से रुकता नहीं शाही लिखावट के हर पन्ने में तकदीर है सहमासा हूँ तुझमें मानो तू ही मेरी तकदीर है क्या कि मुझे थामने पाँव में हम खड़े हैं देखा कई राहों में तू तो आके फिर से तू भी थाम ले हम यहाँ तो मैं तेरे ही नामों के अभी जाम ले कैसे मालूम